everything happened in 77, including Suzi Skates.
Hello and welcome to episode 12 of the Who Cares Anyway podcast, a series of interviews with musicians, writers, artists, and other creative figures on topics related to the book Who Cares Anyway, Post-Punk San Francisco and the End of the Analog Age on Head Press Books, and also on occasion the book When Can I Fly, The Sleeper's Tuxedo Moon, and Beyond, the memoirs of Michael Belfer, which I helped him co-write, and that is on Hozak Books, and still available. And the reason I mention all of that is that, well, for one thing, it's been a little bit of a hiatus since the last episode, but also because the guest on this episode, Suzi Skates, is someone who was present at a lot of the points where those two books overlap. She helped me corroborate and elaborate on some of the stranger-than-fiction, bordering on true crime events that are recounted in Michael's book, and then also in different versions in Who Cares Anyway. But what I wanted to emphasize, and the reason I wanted to have her on as a guest, is that she wasn't just a witness to other people's deeds and or misdeeds. She was also a creative figure in her own right. And this is part of why I use that phrase, other creative figures. Because yes, she did move to San Francisco to attend the Art Institute, as we'll hear. And she did play in a couple of bands later on after she moved to New York. But she made her name as, well, Suzi Skates, Messenger on Wheels, a roller skating equivalent of or variation on the more common bike messenger idea. And so that is something that she did for at least a couple of years in San Francisco before an injury sort of cut that short, and we'll hear about that. And then connecting back to the books, she was a resident of a couple of different legendary/infamous dwellings, one of them being an apartment at 8th and Howard in San Francisco, where members of so many different bands either lived or socialized, and those bands would include the Mutants, the Avengers, Negative Trend, the Sleepers, and so on. And then the other place where she lived that was, again, kind of a nerve center in the early punk era was the American Can Company building out on 3rd Street. There were a lot of different personalities, characters who passed through these locations, and so we're going to hear about some of those. Eventually, Suzi Skates moved to New York in 1980, and so we follow her story there, and there are some additional twists and turns. I don't want to give too much away. So with all that being said, I'll get out of the way and let us get into the interview with Suzi Skates.
Well, I had been studying art, majored in art, studied art in high school. I graduated high school at 16 and moved to London. I was in London living with my then boyfriend and my current husband now, because that's a whole big story. But I moved to London when I was 17, and he worked in the music business, and I was surrounded by all these famous and accomplished people, and I didn't feel like I was doing anything. And art was something I always fell back on. And my best friend, didn't fall back on. I mean, I continued doing it while I was there. But my best friend, Tim Smith, was going to the San Francisco Art Institute. And so I had a real urge to go there as well. And I felt like, I'm around all these people that are so accomplished, and I need to do something myself. I was so young, I was like not even 18 when I moved there, So when I was 19, I decided to go to San Francisco. I decided because he was there, that it was a good idea for me to go there as well. And I was encouraged by him as well to go there. And so I figured it out, and I went. I got in and I went. And I was painting. I got in to do painting. I was in the painting program, painting and drawing.
Okay, because I've I talked to at least a handful, if not more, of people who were at the Art Institute at that time, and a lot of them they were in different fields, but I gathered that a lot of it wasn't necessarily something that you could categorize in terms of painting. A lot of it was more like new genres. I guess that was the department.
Gosh, sorry, I don't remember that. I don't remember the names of the different studies. Those people that you're talking to probably had much more, like I'm an art school dropout. I did not finish and get a degree from the Art Institute, even though I went there. But that's because when I first moved there, well, it's not because, but this is just what happened. I started, I was already skating before I went there, but the summer, 77, this little article in the Bay Guardian started a tsunami of press all over the world, not just San Francisco, but it, like, one little article led to another. And so, I went to the Art Institute, and I was around people there, and I tried to keep up with my studies, but I was very consumed with keeping up with the Suzi Skates stuff. And, I would fit in my classes in between, like, interviews with Perry Match or the New York Times, it sounds really ridiculous, but I was getting phone calls almost every day to do an interview. Like, that's what I was doing. As much as working even, I was doing interviews all the time. And everyone, just wanted to know the same thing, but it was really silly. And then they would take pictures, and then I'd have an article in a newspaper or a magazine or whatever.
Yeah, so I guess we should backtrack and how did that get started and what led to the Bay Guardian article? Like, how long had you been doing it? We should maybe tell people what it was. It was Suzi Skates. It was, I gather there were bike messengers in the days, and you were doing something kind of like a version
Correct.
of that on roller skates.
Yeah. It was a version of a bike messenger, but it was for special events, like deliver a birthday cake, for somebody in an office. Or I did a lot of businesses would hire me for like 2 hours to like be in the financial district just passing out flyers on skates. And I would like just whip them into people's hands before they even knew they were getting them. I was really good at it. It's like, you see people that are passing out flyers. I always take one from them because, I always feel like, it's not an easy job actually, but because I just like would get it into their hand before they even knew what it was, and I always wore like, my skating uniform was a polka dot shirt with a bomber jacket that said Suzi Skates on the back. And that's what I wore for my messenger service, as well as for my other, like I used to call them promotions, and when I would bring somebody a cake at their office, I would give them a big like red lipstick kiss on the cheek, and then I would pin them with a badge, and I would say, "You've just been serviced by Suzi Skates." And the badge said, "I was serviced by Suzi Skates." I'm going to send you one. I have some. I will send you one. I still have some, but And that was the whole gimmick, and people loved it. And it wasn't a gimmick. I was just looking for a little job, but then the press caught on to it, and it just blew up.
So that was that. So you said
It
77.
started the summer. No, it started the. Okay, I moved to San Francisco and started. I was skating, way before then. I was skating in London when I was in London, and I was a street skater. And street skaters were not well known at that time, and you didn't see people on the street skating. It was unusual, hard to believe after the huge skate, trend, roller skating trend, but it is truly hard to believe. But there was nobody skating on the street, and I was, and I did it in London. I did it, like I said, I was surrounded by a lot, my husband, current husband, but my then boyfriend was working with all these super well-known people, from Mick Taylor to Ginger Baker to, gosh, there's so many. He worked with, yeah. Anyway, that's like a whole long story. But I was skating already before I came to San Francisco, and then when I came there, and I was just looking for a little job to do, and so I told myself, you can't find a little job. You have to create your own job. And then I did. I created a little job, and then it just got caught on by the press, and it blew up. I'm working right now. I'm starting to work on memoirs, and I'm trying to get the dates all totally figured out. But I think I came in the spring of 77. It all happened so fast. I think I came in the spring of 77, and then, let's say January of 77. And then in that summer is when the Bay Guardian thing happened. And then after the Bay Guardian thing happened, that's when all the other stuff started happening. As soon as that one thing happened, then I got a news, I don't know, whatever the San Francisco news station is, local thing. Immediately they wanted to do an interview with me. And as soon as I got the Bay Guardian thing, I told myself, you have to get an answering service and a mailing address, because I don't think I even had a proper place to live, yet. I was there kind of, anyway.
Okay, and then at some point in 1977, you wound up at the place at 1183
8th and Howard.
8th and Howard,
8th and
yeah.
Howard.
How did you find out about that place, and who did you know there when you first moved in?
Well, a really incredible and beautiful guy named Scott Covert. I met I think I met him before the summer, but during the summer I met him, and he told me that they had moved into this amazing, they're going to move into this place, and then he invited me over, and so yes, it was Scott Covert that first brought me there, or invited me there. And
that was somebody, and you knew him through the Art Institute?
Yes, through the Art Institute, through my best friend, Tim Smith, through the people at the Art Institute and friends. Yeah, it's like a whole circle. But no, Scott is, I don't want to use the word genius because it's so overused, but he is a genius. And he's really good at what he does, and his work is so incredible. And I love it. And I hope you've looked at some of it, checked it out a little bit.
Yeah, what I saw that was, what would you call them, rubbings of gravestones?
He's been doing it for 30 years, but he puts together, people, he knows where everybody's buried and all over the world, and people that interest him. And he'll go on a pilgrimage to get Noel Coward or, Johnny Saunders or whoever, Candy Darling, or, just Andy Warhol. It's like, it doesn't matter. I mean, it matters because they're people that drive him to do this. He goes all over the world to do it. And then he layers them because, all the tombstones are, different typography and different sayings and this and that. And he layers it and he makes these like kind of abstract paintings out of them. And they're just incredible. And all, I mean, I love them and I love him.
So some of the other names, though, that I know were living there at some point, but I'm not sure if they were there at the beginning. But Marcus Leatherdale, Freddie from the Mutants.
Did not live there. Marcus Leatherdale never lived there.
Okay.
He was a friend of all of ours, basically. The people what I remember when I first went there, the very first time I went there, Scott Covert lived there, Brian Campbell lived there, Amy lived there, Joanne Berman lived there, and it's possible that Freddie Mutant might have been in that first group also, but I can't. I'm a little bit unclear if he came later or if he was one of the first people there. But for sure, it was Amy, Brian, Scott, Joanne, and there was another little room. I don't remember who was in that room.
Okay. Sounds like there must have been at least 3 bedrooms in there based on all that.
Oh, yeah. No, there's more than 3. There's, let me count. Okay. 1, 2, 3, 4. I would say there's 5 bedrooms.
Okay.
When I first went to the safe house, my very first time, I think it was for a party after the Mabuhay, and I might have gone once before with Scott during the day, because what I remember about the safe house also, even the first time I went there, is you climb up this tall flight of stairs, and at the top of the flight of stairs, there's a skylight. And so it's kind of glamorous, It wasn't like a dingy place at all. It was very beautiful. And then at the top of the stairs, there were these racks where there were, for display, aesthetically, there were black leather dildos and handcuffs and leashes and, I don't know, maybe a whip or two, hanging up on these hooks. But it was just, I think it was a aesthetic display. Anyway, and then off to the, if you're looking at the stairs, off to the right, Brian's room, off to the left, Scott's room. You go down, there's a couple of bathrooms, there's an amazing double shower with like big mirrors and stuff. And then a living room and a big kitchen with a big table, and then 2 more bedrooms in the back. And we could also go up on the roof, and there was a communal closet, this big room that just everybody put their clothes, because I don't think there were places to hang your clothes in the actual rooms. I don't remember that, but I remember this huge closet where we all just kind of hung our clothes. And so sometimes we would borrow them from each other. But anyway, I jump ahead. I saw it. But the first time I went was with Scott. He showed me where he was, and then he invited me to a party that was, I believe it was after a show, and because it was crowded, there were always parties after shows at the Mount High or other places. There were always parties, because when you have that many people, like everybody knows somebody, and they all come over and they all have friends. And anyway, so there were always parties, and so I went once. And, that's when I met Brian. And it was the first time I'd met him. I hadn't met him at the Art Institute. But I was wearing these like black suede Oscar de la Renta pumps, and my heel broke. And somebody said, "Oh, take it to Brian. He can fix that." So I knocked on his door, and I didn't even know who he was or anything. And I gave him my shoe, and he proceeded to fix it with a glue gun. And that endeared me. Anyway, but I think at that same party, there was like Jennifer from the Nuns sitting there, gorgeous. And I don't think I ever said 2 words to her. She was so incredibly striking and gorgeous. And she also didn't talk a lot, at least. I don't remember talking to her. And other I think other members of the Nuns might have been there too. Maybe Alejandro was there, but I'm not sure. Maybe Jeff. But anyway, that's the first time I remember. I mean, that's when I met Brian. That's the first time I went to a party there. And then, there were more parties there, and it's where everybody went after. It was a big apartment, so it was comfortable to have a party. And they had a nice big kitchen, a nice big living room, and then plus all the little rooms for other stuff to go on.
This is jumping ahead, but or am I jumping ahead? I sent you that little thing about that Joanne had said about the day that Sonny Barger got let out of prison.
Yeah, now you are jumping ahead. Yeah,
Okay.
but that's okay. What do I remember of that? I remember this must have been when I was already living there, so that is jumping ahead because.
Oh, okay.
But there was always, like I said, I've told you before, there is this myth about. I would always hear about the Hells Angels, and I don't remember ever seeing one, but I'm sure they came but anyway, I don't remember seeing one, but I know that Brian would have appointments with them. And
Okay, yeah, because I was actually just looking back to see, because Brian Campbell, certainly someone I hadn't heard of before. Then Michael told me about him, and then I'd ask other people about him, or other people would mention him. But we were actually trying to figure out if he ever went to the Art Institute. But apparently he did. Bruce Pollock, if that rings from the A-hole, said that
I know.
he thought thought he did sculpture, but he said there's no documentation of his artwork.
Mm-hmm.
And he also said whatever you've heard about Brian Campbell is true. I think he did sculpture, but he didn't really do much artwork. But it sounds like even by the time you met him, he wasn't really going to school, if he ever did.
I think he did. I mean, that's how he met all these people. That's how he knew all these people. And
right,
but when I went to the Art Institute, I did not meet him then. I met him later at the house at 8th and Howard, but he knew everybody. He knew Sally Webster, he knew Sue Brisk, he knew Bruce Pollock, he knew Charlie Hagan. I mean, he knew a lot of the Art Institute people. And when I met him, I mean, everybody knew Brian. Everybody knew him. And he was a really charismatic guy. I mean, he was he like flirted like shamelessly with not only girls or gay guys or dealers or whatever, but he's just like he had like a twinkle in his eye and a little like flirtiness about him, and he was a charismatic looking guy, and he wore like the punk uniform, jeans, slim jeans with a tight black t-shirt, black motorcycle boots, and even though nobody worked out in those days. I mean, nobody did. But anyway, but he had a body like he did push-ups or something. I mean, he was lean, but he was muscular. He had like a flat belly, and he had a really cute body. And Uh, yeah, he was quite charismatic. But one thing about Brian is he was very ambitious. I mean, he was like, he was a dealer, but it was his job. He was ambitious about it, and he did do his fair share of drugs, but obviously, because it got worse, it progressed. But when I first met him, it wasn't out of hand yet, at all. I guess it got that way.
It just occurred to me, this is a silly question, but would you actually skate like to North Beach from?
Oh yeah, I would go. I was always on skates. I mean, I would take them off, and I had like Fredericks of Hollywood little like pumps that I would put on like little mules, and I'd always have skates with me. But I went to many shows with skates on, and I went to school. I went to the Art Institute with skates on. But I would carry like a change of shoes because I might be coming from a job. But did I actually skate all the way to the Art Institute? I don't think so. I'm sure I got a ride most of the time. Okay, that brings me back also to Brian. Okay, in the very beginning when I met Brian, he had a great little adorable sports car, an MG or something, I think. And so he would drive me to school, sometimes, and or drive me to like the area of my job, or I would take a taxi, I guess, too. It's too far to skate from 8th and Howard to
Okay.
the Art Institute.
Yeah, I was trying to picture that. Picture that. The hills too. The hills being a.
Well, yeah, I'm really good at the hills. The hills are not a problem for me. I never had a problem with the hills in San Francisco. But one thing I wanted to mention about that MG of Brian's, I think it was an MG, is I thought it was so great. He had a car. I loved it because my car had died over the summer, and while I was developing Suzi Skates, and so I wasn't using a car anymore. I was, I guess, using public transportation, although I can't even remember doing that. But Brian started. I guess something was wrong with his car, and so he had it parked in the garage at 8th and Howard, and he started taking it apart, trying to fix it. And this became like a year-long project. He was working on that car with parts, and I finally gave up on ever getting a ride from him for anything ever, because he was always down there working on the car. Him and whoever else would come, people. I guess people that were coming by to stop by and maybe buy drugs or get drugs or whatever. And when I say drugs, I mean speed. That's the only thing he dealt, that I know of, that I remember. And anyway, yeah. So he would be down there for days. I mean, I wouldn't even see him. He would just be working on his car, and I always had the hopes that we would drive to the Mabahai, or he would drive me to school, or we would drive out for breakfast, but never happened. I mean, it stopped happening. Let's just put it like that. He had parts like all over. I mean, it became like this thing. I mean, people couldn't believe it. He had all these parts of his car, and he was always working on it, but it never got completed. And I don't remember what he finally did with it, but somebody finally came and got it or something. But it was I think you could call that a speed project,
And with Amy, I did a little looking around, research that she had, I guess, come and gone from, or she was from Memphis or moved
Yeah,
back to Memphis. Yeah, so
yeah.
the Klitz, Klitz, that were associated with Alex Chilton, yeah,
Yes.
and Jim Dickinson. Okay, yeah, so that's Amy Gassner as she's credited on the record.
Well, she was first when she was in San Francisco, when she was living. When I first met her, before I even went to SAFE, it was through the Art Institute and through Tim Smith. And that summer, I remember she was Punk of the Month in this new magazine. I think it was even the premiere issue of Punk magazine. And there was this like centerfold of Amy. And she was just like, this voice, this like Southern sweet voice and Amy, that's how I always used to see her. I loved her. And she was just this pinup. I mean, she dressed kind of rockabilly or, I didn't know it at the time, but she dressed vintage, sort of. It was pre-rockabilly, I guess. But she was just adorable and really sweet, and I really loved her. And she had a little room there, and she was a former girlfriend of Alex Chilton. She was also a former girlfriend of Jonathan Postal. And then I think when she was living there, she was with Jimmy from the Avengers. Eventually, that's what happened.
Sometimes the way I'll see it presented is, like punk rock, and there's no distinction between 77 and 81, but then learning about it, you realize, that's like 3 or 4 distinct little mini eras that already passed between waves
of like
people.
Months,
Yeah.
It would change in months. For me, it would change because I was changing. For instance, that summer in my recollection, which, like I said, I'm going through and trying to put dates on these to validate that, to like help me figure it out. But in my recollection, that summer of 77, obviously there was no Avengers, there was no Sleepers, there was the Nuns, yes. Crime was like the biggest. I remember that summer, Crime was like the band that I saw posters for that summer. I don't remember seeing Avengers or anybody else before that. Now that's just my memory, but to me, everything happened in 77. Like everything exploded in 77, including Suzi Skates. And people like my friends or colleagues or whatever, they couldn't believe that I was getting so much press and I was getting so much attention and this and that. And like, they're working so hard to get that, but I'm just skating. And that's really literally what I was doing. But, that's just how it works sometimes. And I guess, and I learned a lot from that, But then I think I kind of expected that to keep going, and it didn't. Really, although it did lead to other things, which, was my comic strip, which was really cool. Literally, they were calling me that I invented roller skating. That I was on the cover of the first roller skating magazine. Life magazine wanted to do something on me, which I couldn't do because I actually had a big accident. But
I wanted to ask about that accident because you mentioned it before and mentioned that eventually you wound up, and that leads into the American Can Company building in that era, but that you wound up staying there because of the accident. But was that a roller skating accident, or was that something else?
No. It's so horrible even to think about, but I severed an artery in my foot because I had brought up this like coffee table top it had a sliced edge glass coffee table top, and I thought, oh, I know it's there. It'll be fine. And of course, I bumped into it, and it's like a machete, and it sliced through an artery in my foot, and I was in the hospital, with I had microsurgery, major surgery. It was bad. It was bad. All because I thought, oh, I love this big piece of glass. This would look amazing in my apartment. I brought it up, and I bumped into it in 10 minutes. Did I think of taping? Did I think of duct taping it? No, that wouldn't be pretty. No, it was the most stupid thing I ever did. And that also did change my life in a way, changed the course of my life. Because, I ended up, giving up my apartment, which I got after the 8th and Howard place, which is when I was sort of in a breakup with Brian. And then, who's there to pick me up, after being in the hospital for 2 weeks, and who's bringing me flowers and teddy bears and all that kind of stuff when I was in the hospital? It's Brian. And then he brought me home, and he's like, you're going to, because I need to be taken care of. I had a cast, up to my knee. So I let him take care of me. And so then that started the next period, and I gave up the apartment that I was at, which was Sacramento. Wait, no, it was, oh God, I can't really think of it. It was,
you said Nob Hill when we
Yes,
first...
Nob Hill. Thank you. Yeah, it was Nob Hill. I want to say Sacramento, but it wasn't Sacramento because that's a different street. Anyway, it was a horrible accident and completely life-changing accident, to be honest. Because Brian and I had already broken up, so didn't expect to go back to him. But then he came back, and he kind of became my caregiver, like a fun caregiver. But he was great. And that's when, so now I'm at the American Tan building. I'm living with Brian. I mean, I used to visit him there, and it was an amazing place, beautiful.
Right. So, I tried to figure out what, evidently it's been turned into some real high-end living, but that was at way out on
3rd and 20th.
3rd Street and 20th. Yeah. So that brings it into that part of town where Club Foot was, but otherwise, again, for anybody picturing, if you look at San Francisco on a map, this would be down on the lower right hand corner of in the Bay, but a part of town where at least back then, even when I lived there in the 2000s, that was pretty remote. Yes.
Yeah, but we all had cars.
Right. Okay.
So we had parking there. We literally had parking in front of the place. It was amazing. No, it was an amazing place to live. And yes, Club Foot was just like, a couple blocks away. But that started up a little later. And, the place was immense. I mean, it's still immense. I mean, it's maybe like 4 blocks of buildings, and we lived in a really nice part of it. And, but they were renting places all over the building. It wasn't just us, it was us. And then, lots of people, we kind of hooked up a lot of our friends to rent there also.
Okay, it sounds like it was almost, wow, I found an image of it from 1910, but it sounds like it was like a dormitory type situation from how you described it, based on how you described it.
Kind of, but everybody had their own space, Okay. But the bathrooms down the hall. There were a couple bathrooms, a couple showers. I remember, taking showers all over that building. You could get private showers, You could do like, anyway, yeah, it's a little scary to think back about those times, Will, but, you know, it was also really beautiful and a beautiful place to live, you know. Well, I'm sure now they've got incredibly gorgeous places for people to live. Aesthetically, it was really a beautiful building.
Bruce from Flipper remembered there being some kind of sewing company, but were there still active?
Yeah. No, there was a shoe guy. The owner of the building produced shoes. They were like a shoe manufacturer. Because I was really interested in shoes. You know, I'm a roller skater. I'm interested in shoes. I'm interested in fashion. You know, I wanted him to like give me a job. Also, you know, I really wanted to be part of his shoe factory because I'm like, hey, I've got great ideas. You know, and literally he was like downstairs. You know, like, but it was so huge I could skate there. You know, I mean, we're talking blocks. You know,
yeah, okay.
Like in a building. You know.
4 blocks from what I can see here.
Yeah. You know, but I lived there and I also went to the factory because I was interested in it. Because first of all, somebody interested in shoes, but also I'm a roller skater and I feel like I'm a famous roller skater. You should like give me a job.
So Flipper early on, they were rehearsing down there, but you said that they ended up in
Flipper did, yeah. Which I'm so sorry I haven't sent that to you yet.
That's okay.
Yeah, Flipper did. I'll send you that page.
I see the one page on your that was uploaded on your Facebook page, but I don't know how many pages there are total.
Well, there's tons because I was in every issue of Roller Skate magazine. But I'm sorry, I forgot what the question was. But
I don't know.
There was a rehearsal studio. There was a rehearsal studio where, you know, lots of bands rehearsed. If I remember, it was probably Brian along with some musicians that gave the advice of how to soundproof and everything. Because there was like foam on the walls and stuff like that. And so it was sort of rehearsal space looking. And also, but it was loud. You know, you'd hear these bands rehearsing and it was, you could hear it. And then Club Foot made a rehearsal space. I think a lot of people started going there too, you know.
You eventually did move to New York, and then the question was how much of that was a matter of San Francisco pushing you away or New York drawing you in, and you felt like it was more the latter. But do you remember, was there a specific thing that led you to move to New York? Were you still doing Suzi Skates at that time?
I was like really bored. I was really bored with skating. I mean, it became such a huge trend that I didn't love it anymore. That's all I remember is when I moved to New York, I mean, I brought my skates and I skated all over New York, of course. But I wasn't, like, Suzi Skates wasn't what I was doing, really. And my comic strip only went on for another, like, 1 or 2 more issues, and then that folded. And I was okay with that. But I was kind of over skating. You know, I wanted to go to the next step, you know, after skating. I mean, do you remember what a huge phenomenon roller skating was? It was just...
I was a little bit
You're probably
young.
5 years old.
I remember sometimes there would be a birthday party at the roller rink, and I would dread it because I couldn't even stand up. I'd have to cling on to the rail. And
I'll teach you to skate. Easy.
We both have a
But
high center of
you know,
gravity. I'm 6'5", and I think you're 6 feet,
I'm
maybe.
6,
Yeah.
about maybe now 5'11". Because you get shorter as you get
Right.
older. But I mean, I'm a little bigger than 5'11", but but anyway, um, yeah. I just like when I moved to New York, I wanted something else, you know. And then I got here, and without my Suzi Skates identity, it was different, you know. And then, I did start something else, you know. And I don't know, it's in New York. I, it was time to leave San Francisco for me. That's all I can say. It was time to leave. I had reached, the end of my possibilities that I could see. I needed to make a change. And so I came to New York, and I did.
Okay, and this is part of why I wanted to do this interview, because I don't really know much of what happened. I know that you met at Chosei, and he was playing with the
Oh, no, I knew
Plasmatics.
him way
Okay,
before then.
okay,
I knew
okay.
Chosei also from San Francisco. I ran into him here. I didn't even look him up, which I could have. I just ran into him at the Mud Club, same as I ran into Marcus. I decided, I'm going to just show up, and I'm just going to find people. I'm not going to call people and ask them to help me, or, get me situated, or, anyway, I had my own, I was fine.
So you had met Chosei in San Francisco, and so did he go to the Art Institute as well?
He went to the San Francisco Film Institute, if I'm correct. Same. Jimmy also, I think, went there from the Avengers. Jim Wilsey.
Okay.
Anyway, it was the San Francisco, or is that the Art Academy? Oh, gosh, it was downtown San Francisco. It wasn't the Art Institute, but Chosei only had like 3 words that he spoke at that time in English. I think one was incredible. The other was not my favorite, and the other was amazing. And you'd be surprised how far you can get along in a conversation or in a social situation by just saying those 3 words, with his emphasis on the way he said them. He's amazing. I loved him too, but I mean, it was weird because you didn't, you couldn't have a conversation with him really because he didn't speak much English. But we always had a connection, and so then when I was in San Francisco still, he got in the Plasmatics, and they started getting this fame. He sent me the Interview magazine article on them, or the Soho News article, or he would mail me little, like press clippings and stuff.
So because I had
Mm-hmm.
mistakenly thought that he was still in the Plasmatics, and that you met him somehow when he was in the Plasmatics. But not only did you
Oh,
meet him
no,
in
no,
San
no, 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 no,
Francisco,
no,
he was already
no.
out of the
I met
Plasmatics.
him.
Yeah.
I took him to the Ramones concert when the Ramones came to San Francisco in Berkeley. I took Chosei, who's a few years older than me. He's maybe 5 years older than me. 4 years, 5 years, which is like an eternity when you're young. I brought him to see the Ramones, and he decided, you don't have to be young. I mean, they're my age, and they're still playing in bands. Why can't I do that? Because he used to play in Japan, and so he was already moving to New York. Anyway, I was the last person he visited. He came. Actually, he needed a place to stay that night, and before he moved to New York, he drove cross country in his red Citroen, and he went there and he decided, besides doing his, he went to school for a little bit, but then he answered an ad to join to audition for the Plasmatics, which weren't called the Plasmatics yet, but to audition for a band. And so so it was pre-Plasmatics that I knew him. And he was making films and going to film school when I met him. And he and Tim Smith both lived at the dorms in Lone Mountain College, which are this beautiful estate in San Francisco, like when you're driving out towards the beach. I guess they call it south. I don't know what they call it, but you're driving out towards the beach, Sunset or whatever that's called. And, Chosei had like a triple room. He had like a loft at the dorm. He didn't have just like one room. He had like 3 rooms. Beautiful. But he was just this eccentric character, and he was a really good friend of my friend Tim Smith, who was the artist that was living there at the Lone Mountain College in just a regular little dorm room. But I would wait sometimes at Chosei's, like if Tim wasn't home. But so we came here, and what happened was, you get caught up in day-to-day life, and he was waitering, I was waitressing, and then Chosei asked me to be in his band. And so then suddenly I have a band. I'm a singer in a band. And that wasn't the first band I was in. It's funny, because I think about it, it's like, I'm not a musician. When I think about myself, I'm not a musician.
But this was Aurora Bora? Is that?
Yeah, I was in Aurora Bora first with Chosei, and then later, like a few years later, I played bass with Raging Slab with Rayanne Dienstag as the drummer, and you know who she is.
Yes.
The famous Rayanne from the
stolen guitar.
Stolen guitar story, yeah. Oh, you're laughing. I like that.
well, because Michael had one version of that story, and I interviewed Eric Fournier, the Sleepers manager, on that tour, and he had a different recollection. And
I'm sure he does. And I knew nothing about it, honestly, because I'm always the one, frankly, I'm always the one not in the club because I don't do heroin. I'm not in the club. Do you understand what I'm saying?
I understand. I'm not in the club.
It's like,
either.
if you don't do heroin, you're not in the club. I mean, it's not a bad thing. They kind of protect you, but like, if you don't do it, you're not in the club. And that's how I always felt. I felt like that a lot in California, but I already got like that because in London, I wasn't in the club either, because I'm not saying I never did drugs. I'm totally not saying that. But I was never in the club.
I'm not sure how much these things are connected in your mind, but Suzi Skates, roller skating, singing for Aurora Bora, you're painting initially. Was there a next stage to your artistic or performing career, if that's the right word, trajectory, path, or what came after that for you? I apologize for not knowing.
No, it's okay. It's like, I go through different stages. I was involved in fashion, and I moved to Paris, and I wanted to model. I was in my early 20s. And then I moved to Madrid to be with the designer who I initially moved to New York with, Renee Zamudio. And there was this huge movement going on in Madrid, the La Movida Madrileña, after Franco. Anyway, there was a huge art movement going on there. So I've been in all these different art movements. It's really interesting. I've been able to be there. So that was really incredible too. And then I was there until I needed to come back to America. And then I came back and I got married to Chosei Funahara. Like way back to I was Art Institute days. I mean, he was from the Film Institute. He was a filmmaker. And then, Plasmatics. But, yeah, if you put it all down on paper, it's like there's all this stuff going on, yeah.
Yeah, and just make sure I'm not totally misunderstanding this. Would you say Raging Slab? This is the same Raging Slab?
Yes. I was the original bass player of Raging Slab. I know.
That's okay, because when you said it before, I thought
I'm not like in Wikipedia or anything
because I look. It says it formed in 1983 when Greg
Rayanne and I. Rayanne was the bass of the drummer. Rayanne, the famous Rayanne, now the guitar.
Okay.
Rayanne and I were the original drummer and bass. She was the drummer. I was the bass player for Raging Slab, like as they were forming with Greg Stremka and his.
It says Elise Steinman. Okay.
Elise, yeah, which was really sad, but we play. I mean, I played way more shows with them than I did with Aurora Bora.
That's crazy.
We played lots of shows. Yeah, no, I know.
They wound up being label mates with the reformed Flipper.
Well, that was before me. Well,
no, late. Well, no, that would be late. Well, that would be.
I mean, that's after me.
After, like early '90s. Yeah, and with Rick Rubin.
Yeah. I moved to Paris. Like I left the band, got kicked out of the band. Whatever happened, we had a difference of opinions about stuff. And both Rayanne and I left the band and moved to Paris. And I was going back to modeling, and I had a friend who, was pursuing, wanted me to pursue that. And anyway, yeah, it's pretty funny. I know, it's pretty funny. That's all I'm going to say. Pretty funny that I was in Raging Slab. But again, like I can't remember how many months it was even, because it was probably 1 year. Yeah. But I'm working on my memoirs right now, and I need to like figure this stuff out. And it's hard going back and figuring out the timeline.
Yeah. That was just when you first said that, I thought, well, it's got to be another band with the same name, and or I have to be mishearing. No. Same Raging Slab, the one and only. No, I mean we were once just this underground, like little band with Greg Stremka, who was like very, very, very ambitious, and Elise, also very, very, very ambitious. And it was sort of like Rayanne and I were like their, bandmates. But, it turned into something else. And, it just didn't work. I mean, we had to leave. They completely changed. They completely changed their focus of what the kind of music they wanted to do and everything. Like I didn't even identify with it at all. But now I love it. I think it's so fun.
But at the time, I was like, what? It was like Southern rock. Yeah, weird.
Okay. Well, that is something I did not know. I did not know. So
Well, there you
there you
go.
go. Yeah, so that's why we do this.
No, but this is what I mean. I've gone through all these like weird stages of my life.
Yeah, it's maybe this is like the Zelig idea isn't quite it, because that's not just like you were just a bystander or seeing things, you were doing things as well. But one thing I got from talking to a lot of different people was, the fact that this scene wasn't just music, and that it encompassed a lot of different things that you can't necessarily put into a category, because roller skating is not necessarily the first thing that would come to somebody's mind, but it was something that you were doing that was distinctive and memorable, that and original, but still part of that era in that way.
Yeah, I was influenced by San Francisco itself, the whole city, the energy of the city, but also the Art Institute, and then the excitement of the new music and the new art and the new young people that were vibrant and energetic and creative and from all over the place, getting together and exchanging ideas. It was a great time, I have to say. I really loved it, being there. And I still love going to San Francisco because I just love aesthetically the place. But as far as like punk for me, I mean, my personality, I guess I liked the punk aesthetic in my fashion and style, but I definitely didn't live the punk lifestyle much. I mean, although I was around it, but I don't know, especially when I think back, I guess I have like rose-colored glasses when I think back about what I was like, or, we were young. We were young also. Everybody was young and beautiful. That's the other thing.
Jet